So how you been?
I've been great, man. It's been a very busy beginning of the year for me.
Yeah.
I'm over at Paramount Pictures right now,
Yep.
working on Transformers One
Yep.
and production designing that movie. So
That's dope.
we're in our like final stretch right now on the film. So it's just a hard push to get everything done and make sure that everything's looking amazing for the final movie.
This is in LA?
Yes, I'm based out of LA on Melrose in Hollywood.
Yeah.
And we come into the office 3 days a week.
Oh, okay.
And so I work on the lot Monday through Wednesday, and then I work from home on Thursdays and Fridays. That's why I was able to jump on with you this morning.
Nice, nice. Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for your I really appreciate it. I'm like, you have no idea how stoked I am about this conversation because it's a little bit personal for me, but we'll talk about that in a second.
Yeah,
But it's thank you for coming here.
absolutely.
I really appreciate it.
No, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have, and or just keep it casual and just have a cool convo. So I'm open to all of the above.
Cool. Thank you, man. I don't know if you remember, man, but we had a meeting, man. I think it was like over 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I think. Oh, you remember? Yeah, yeah. And
I do.
you I think you presented some artwork. I think you showed some artwork during that time, but we didn't know what it was, or I think you were on that stage where you didn't know maybe what it was completely. Is that correct?
Mhm. Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay. I don't remember what the meeting was all about, like why we met and like what was the whole thing. But I do remember having you there in the meeting and seeing some artwork, which obviously is now for the Blue Eye Samurai series. Which again, congratulations on that. That was amazing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate
Great
that.
series. I didn't. I got so hooked as the episodes progress, and by the last episode I was like, no, like I want more, because I didn't
Yeah.
know. I thought it was just gonna be like a one season thing. Like it sort of set it up for the next really nicely.
Yeah.
And also I was super impressed with the specifically for practical martial arts move, because I practice martial arts and I've done it for a long
Oh,
time.
cool.
And every time I saw like a move, and I'm like, ooh, I know that. Or yeah, so so that was really great. But how do you guys? I mean, what was the process? Because that meeting was like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah, for me, I came on very early on. It was
Yeah.
early 2020, and that was like at the threshold of the pandemic.
Right.
And so when I came on, I was hired to be the production designer, and Jane Wu, the supervising director, brought me on to that show. And it was Michael Moon. He was running adult animation at the time, and they were really hoping to make a wave with a new show.
Right.
And they had saw my portfolio, and I have been working on Samurai project for like over 13, 14 years. And so I have a big portfolio of that kind of work. And they said that this is right in line with what you're personally developing. And they saw like two pieces that were very specific. And they were like, there's this one shot I did for my book, and it's a character walking through this like rice field, and he's approaching this like village, and in the background there's like these really tall roof villages, and
Right.
they're like, that's the show. Like if you can create that, then that's what you want to see on screen. And it was a little bittersweet because it's something I'm doing for myself personally, but at the same time it's like I feel like I'm personally waiting to see something like this in animation. Nobody has done anything like this visually before, where you're really, pushing the boundaries of like the graphic style and really trying to make something that makes a visual statement out there. And so I hired a team around me. I was there personally for like weeks and weeks before, they actually officially called me production designer, kind of creating a style guide for the show. And that's sort of one of the hard things about what we do is a lot of times you're afraid that they're just going to take all of your ideas and just basically make a show out of it. And so I had to be very careful about how I branded myself and, how I approached the show too, as well. It's like, hey, here, I'm only coming on if I'm production designer. I don't want to be a visual development artist. And so let's make that very clear from the get-go. And a lot of times, I don't know if you're familiar with this, a lot of production designers, because it's such a high level job, they get a lawyer involved. to negotiate
really?
Their job. Yes, and sort of what the practicalities of it all. And thinking back in retrospect, now that I've been a production designer on a few shows, I'm going to do that from now on. On that show, I didn't. And it kind of helps you in a lot of ways to sort of navigate the political landscape of creating, visuals for a show. And that way, not only are you protecting yourself on an intellectual property way, but you're also protecting yourself financially, so that when you negotiate, there's terms and conditions that they get emotional about. Studios are just a company is just a company.
Yep.
Right. When you approach yourself as a individual, it's a little different, but when you come in and you say, hey, I have someone to negotiate for me, like an agent or a lawyer, then they get serious and they start to go, okay, this person's a real player here. And they take you seriously from the jump street. And that's something that I didn't know until I had been in a production designer role for quite a few years.
Right.
And now if I was to negotiate on a future show, I didn't do this on Transformers. I negotiated individually. But on a new movie, I would be a little bit more forthright about getting somebody involved that's on a legal side. And there's a lot of legal tape that we don't know about, Jose. One of the things I realized was there's little things in the fine print that always protect the studio and doesn't protect the artist. And, as a individual contractor or a freelancer, these are vernaculars that we should be able to understand. And I don't. I'm very clearly, that's not my job. My job is to create visuals and to create a team and to bid out the show, to be able to look at an entire show as an overall, overarching view from the 3,000 foot view and say, hey, who do I need here to make this thing the most successful show that it can possibly be, and or movie, and then create a pipeline around it. Yeah. And I'm a technical thinker. I'm very, very technical, where I understand 3D very well. I have a 3D background. I studied in Maya in school. I know 3D animation. I know hand-drawn animation. And I can sculpt and draw and paint everything, model make. And all those things are so vital in the creation of anything, whether it is a theme park design or, a video game or a movie. And I'm going a long way around of explaining how I got onto BES, because it was a culmination of 20 years of understanding.
Right.
It's been a long haul, and it's a lot of pre-planning, thinking, strategizing, discussing, and it really is the art of war. When you go into a conversation about blueprinting out a show, you go into a war room and you look at things as an overview with a map, and you start planning out, where do I put my soldiers in order to make the best battleground possible? And some soldiers fall, including myself on some shows where, it's too much and you're asking for help. You're asking for recon. You're like, I need somebody to get on the battlefield and see where all the pitfalls are. And I also need support, maybe on the visual side, someone that can do all the research for me while I'm running on the designs. And so you just need to know where your weaknesses lie, and also where the traps are up ahead. And a lot of things are dictated by the vendor and also dictated by the people that you're working with, whether I be at the leadership, right? So a lot of it has to come with lots of series of trust falls. You get into a situation where it's something's going to blow up on you, and you're I see that. I see the iceberg up ahead, but nobody's paying attention to it, but you see it. You have to be the first there to go, hey, I see that iceberg. This is going to blow up in our faces. Let's do this, this, and this.
Yep.
And so I'm constantly, I have my book with me. I'm constantly taking notes throughout an entire production and saying, here, this is where we need to put our muscle on these things. And that show was not easy. It was definitely the hardest show I've ever worked on. It was a series of 8 episodes that were about an hour each. And each one of those is a feature movie. Mm-hmm. And all of them, had to be done at such a high level in terms of scope. So you have the backdrop of the pandemic, which was all new to us. Yeah. You have the backdrop of, a scope on a movie that is Game of Thrones level, individual movies. And then you have to build a team around it, budget that out, and then you're on a schedule that makes no fucking sense, right? So it's how do I do all this in a way where there's a waterfall, right, of different episodes falling on top of each other? So what I did was I created a kit a modular toolkit for the entire show, whether it was like a series of sets, a series of individual props, and then reusable assets. And I came from a games background.
Right.
And so I approached it like as if I was building a modular kit for a video game.
Right.
And I was like, okay, each asset needs to be created in a way that where it could be instanced and or referenced into Maya. And then we were using different tool systems, Substance Painter, Blender, Maya, and we were rendering in Unreal Engine and in different engines just to see things in preview. And I found, for me personally, having that video games background is the only reason why I feel like that show is even a success. I ended up leaving the show around a year and a half in because I was asking for things and not getting them. I was like, hey, I need more people on 2D layout. I need more people to do 3D modeling. And the studio wasn't listening to me. And I said that you're burning myself out, my team out, and my art director. And I was like, this is not worth it. My mental health, my personal growth is going away. And I feel as though I'm at a point right now where I'm in an impasse, where I have to go, hey, do I stay here and get roasted to oblivion and be disrespected, right? Or do I just walk away from this and have my head high and I did a great thing and I actually helped set up the show and I can walk away from this with my honor and with my integrity.
Right.
And I think that's something that not a lot of people think about when they go into a position, is just having the integrity and the respect. Most people will bow down to anything that's given to them and then let people burn them into ashes. And I will not do that. I have a lot of respect for myself. I have a lot of respect for my team. And at the end of the day, you got to be able to do the right thing for yourself and for the individuals that you're guiding, because you're a leader. You got to make sure that they're all taken care of and they're all okay.
Yeah. And you mentioned something about, hiring the right people. And I'm guessing, the higher you are in that sort of like hierarchy, the more self-aware you have to be in order to know what your weaknesses are and your strengths, so you can actually get the right people to fill in, those gaps and voids. But I remember because you were posting, and I was curious about it. You were posting a lot of paintings and explorations that you were doing in a very similar style for a very long time. And at the beginning, before the show was announced and we saw it and all that, like, I just thought it was just you, painting and doing pieces. But did you use that? Was that part also as a strategic sort of market to sort of test the market to see if people like the style and then incorporate?
No, it was actually what I had been doing years and years and years before the show. So I'm working on a book, and it's a passion project called Yamamoto.
Nice.
And I wrote the story with two friends, Jonathan Ryder and Tim Kalock, and we wrote it in college. So this was born 20 years ago. And so with that story, it's a great way for us to build our portfolio. And also on top of that, explore my own visual style and how I can evolve a variety of styles.
Right.
And I think that that's something that I learned from The Skillful Huntsman. There's a book that was published by Design Studio Press by Scott Robertson that had Mike Yamada and Felix Yoon and Kang Lee, one of my favorite artists of all time, and a friend and a mentor. And those gentlemen did something very different at the time, where they actually published a book that showed how to create a story, a visual story, create characters, props, environments around a world. And I saw that and I was deeply inspired. I was like, that's what I want to do for myself.
Right.
And it made me go, hey, I'm making a book. I don't care how long this thing takes. It could be 30 years from now that I release it, but this is going to be my magnum opus. This is going to be my life's work. And that's the thing I'm passionate about. And for me, it's a trilogy. It's like a Star Wars, where, it has all the necessary layers that it needs to be an ecosystem, a biome, a psychological marvel that people will be puzzled over and study into the future. And that's my goal every single day, is to be passionate about something and have those layers of ideas and design and narrative that are injected into the work. And, I felt like that was a great place for me, a training ground to work on Blue Eye Samurai, to go, hey, how do I do this for myself? Like this is it's kind of like a selfish awesomeness where it's like, I get to sort of explore in this new territory that's for a show and movie. I like working on movies because I'm like, how would I approach my own movie?
Right.
If I was to do this, I do the same thing for the companies. I would do the same thing for myself if I wanted this to be a success, and that's how I approach it.
Yeah, it's very rare. I think it's so rare that an artist gets to do her own sort of style, and a company, they're doing like a very similar thing, and they're sort of like combining. Because usually when you get hired, you get to do whatever they are doing, and pretty much do their stuff. But in your case, it's almost like a mix of what you were doing with what they were, or their vision for it sort of like was on the same line, which I think is like super rare. Like you don't see that happen quite often.
It's funny you say that, Jose. I believe that if you do what you love to do,
Mhm.
and and people see how much fun you're having doing it, they'll hire you to do
Yeah.
it. And I think that's the misconception of a lot of artists is they go, "Hey, I got to do the style of Spider Verse. Like I need to do everything leaning and skewing and graphic and all this stuff." And you got it wrong. Like that's not what they want. They want someone that has their own point of view. They
Right.
want
Right.
someone that can create something that's their own and has a thumbprint to it that feels different than all the other visual styles that are out there. And I think that will set you apart. It'll make you sought after. And I think my best advice to any artist is stop looking at everybody else. Like, do you like really be passionate about what you're creating, whether it's your own, story or it's your own visual style that you want to explore. And I don't think I'm married to any style, to be honest with you. Like I can paint very like photorealistic if I
Right.
need
Right.
to, where it needs to look like a final shot from a movie where it's live action, or I can do something that's extremely animation and like Ivan Earl. And I'm looking at a lot of different people like Sid Mead, of course, and
Yeah.
a lot of the staple like traditional painters like Edgar Payne and John Singer Sargent and you name it. I'm looking at all of them. Craig Mullins, who's the godfather of digital art.
Hmm.
All those people are part of what make me too. Because I really like what Kang is doing with his like wild fantasy card that he pulls. And I like Miyazaki's work because he has the world beyond the frame. And I want to know those stories even further beyond Spirited Away or Princess Mononoke or Nausicaa.
Right. Right.
All those stories like sort of find their way into me, into my psyche, into my DNA, and create me a blueprint for who I am. And I think that that's the key, is to just be inspired and then use those and channel all of those worlds around yourself injected into the work that you're creating.
Right. Right. My I was doing a little bit of research, and I mean I actually had to cut down because I was gonna do an intro and all that, but I actually had to cut down most of this stuff from your background because it was just like too long.
Yeah, no,
but
really okay. Yeah.
but I have a so when I was looking at your trade, because you started as a regular visual development artist or concept artist, where you kind of call it, you sort of like
Background painter, actually. I was a background painter on Secrets of the Furious Five for Kung
right.
Fu Panda.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And you were a art director, and now you're a production designer. So that sort of trajectory to me is the closest that I want to have as an artist, because I personally don't see myself doing art. Like I don't need to do art, like the actual art, 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day. Like I like to
Yeah.
manage. I like to set up the team. I like to do that management part. And I was looking at your trajectory, and I'm like, this is exactly, if I continue in this art world, this is sort of like the same sort of path that I want to take. So I want to pick your
That's
brain about how did that sort of happen.
Well, first, you never stop doing art as a
Right.
production designer. That's something, I think that's a misconception, is that you're just going to manage. The studios are hiring you for your work, and so you're building a team around yourself that can share the visual language that you create. And so you need a very strong art director, someone that you can is your ally. Like, so it's essentially like a life partner
Yeah.
that you pick. And for me, that's Gerald De Jesus. And Jerry and I met through my wife. Actually, my wife had an art director on Maya and the Three under Jorge Gutierrez, and Jorge is very smart about who he hires. He has like an amazing team behind him creating his visuals, because Jorge's work is the bread and butter behind his stories, like The Book of Life and
Right.
Maya and the Three. And I love his work. I love him. I love I have a lot of respect for what he does. And in fact, I have a lot of respect for Latino filmmakers in general. Like Guillermo del Toro is one of my favorite directors of all time. And I wanted to work with him as well. And I almost had the opportunity to before Blue Eye Samurai, but I turned it down at the time. So there are, chances, and what I'm trying to get back to in a long way of saying it is that you have to do art in order to be a production designer. So whether it be, creating the style guide or doing the lighting script or the color script, but also the very specific organization that it takes to make a show is built on knowing how long things take to make. Right. So I know this because I've watched your YouTube, and I love a few of your videos where you start talking about time management. And I do a lot of that myself, where, I get up in the morning and I'm like, what am I going to do today? What do I need to tackle before 11 a.m.? Right. And you get these like super concentrated burst of energy where it's like you just literally funnel everything else out, and you're just like fully locked into what I do. I don't listen to music. I don't turn on any movies. Like I am like me and my work, and that's it. Because I don't get very much time to do it because I'm in meetings making judgment calls about whole sequences, or working with my cinematographer about shots and talking about what's the staging is and what the necessaries are for the camera. Yeah. And so we as artists, and how we evolve as artists and what we do as artists, is all created by the layer cake of things that we've done thus before. So because I was a viz dev artist at DreamWorks Animation, I learned the DreamWorks Animation pipeline. And so the DreamWorks Animation pipeline was amazing. It has its pitfalls, it has its mistakes, like any other animation studio, but they were born out of Disney. When Jeffrey Katzenberg came in there with Geffen and Steven Spielberg, they knew what they were doing. I mean, they had Amblin for years before that. And Geffen had founded an entire, music studio. And Katzenberg was one of the smartest producers of all time. Lion King. That's enough said, man. And you look at those like massive, juggernaut of thinking, and you go, how is that success gonna find its way into what I do? And so it's osmosis, man. I was in school for a very long time. I started school. I graduated from school in 1988, high school. And I went into animation think about this. I went into animation in 2007. So there was a long time between that time and that time. That was all because I was in school, because I actually was studying biology, and I thought I was going to be a doctor. So I had a medical background. My parents are all in medicine. My dad's a physician. And I was like, I'm always drawing. Like I'm doing medical illustration, I'm doing like the study of the human body, like Albinius stuff. And I took that and I was like, you know what? That's not what I want to do. I want to learn about like entertainment. So I went to school. I put myself through school, and I paid off my student loans and all that stuff. With my dad did help me. My dad made good money. So he's like, hey, I'll help you for your first couple of years, but I want you to earn your own money. Right. And I want you to pay off the rest of school. So, I learned a lot about money managing and being very smart about how I go about things through that. And then another thing I realized was my long game, my path, my I would say trajectory, as you call it, was to start off as a junior and really learn the ropes. And so before that, I was in games. I was a junior concept artist at Shiny Entertainment, the same studio that did Earthworm Jim. And I was only there for 6 months. And I was like, dude, I need to get into animation, because I saw Prince of Egypt. And when I saw Prince of Egypt, I lost my mind. I was like, I have a Jewish background. My dad's Jewish. My mom's Catholic. So I have like a very split heritage. But I love the story of Exodus and ancient Egypt. And I just love ancient Egypt in general. So I was like, that's the studio I want to fucking work for. That's insane. Like that scope was so big. I love epic. That's my thing. I love epic things like Lawrence of Arabia and anything Steven Spielberg, anything Miyazaki. Akira Kurosawa is my favorite director of all time. So I was like, what do I do to get there? How do I get there? So I started looking at a lot of like stuff that other artists weren't looking at, and that was traditional art. And going like, what makes the masters a master? So it was like the Hudson School of, river painters. And it was like a lot of the old landscapes by Richard Schmidt and all that stuff. I was like, how do I take what they're doing in landscape and epicness and inject it into storytelling? and make those two things into a baby. So I was like, how do I, mold my mind to do that? So I focused my portfolio on that. And I had 25 pieces in my book. I'll never forget this. I brought it to SIGGRAPH, which is, I'm sure you're familiar with SIGGRAPH. And I put my book on the table on the DreamWorks booth, and it was just recruiters there. And it was a leather-bound book. I made it all by hand. I went to Costco and printed out every single image on high gloss paper and like made sure it was perfect. It was an 8.5 by 11. And I just dropped it and I said, just make sure this gets to the right people. I want to be a visual development artist. And I was working at Shiny. I totally forgot I did it. It was weird. Like 6 months passed. I'm like working away and I get a call, and it was a recruiter, and it was from DreamWorks. Nice. And they're like, we have two movies for you that we want you to interview for. We have a meeting set up with you with Hamid Sekrat, who was the producer on Kung Fu Panda at the time for Secrets of the Furious 5. And also with another guy named David James, who was the production designer on Monsters vs. Aliens. And I was sitting there and I was shaking because I was so excited. And I was like, I got to get out to the parking lot. I got to call him back. And I shared an office with my lead. My lead concept artist was like right behind me. And I was like, I got to take this call. See you later. And I just like ran outside the parking lot. And I was like, hello. I called him and I was just like so excited. I just remember the day. And she's like, yeah, do you have time this week to come in? And it was like a Wednesday, and they set the meeting up for a Friday. And I was like, I got to make up an excuse. I got to take this meeting. So, and I had never really even been to LA by myself, except for with my parents.
Right.
So I immediately told my lead, I have a doctor's appointment on Friday. And it's always my excuse. And I went out to DreamWorks, and I remember just walking around the campus, and I was so like, to this day, I still dream about that place. It was like it was literally a campus of just a beautiful landscape, and I was like everything that I had in my imagination and more. And anyways, long story short, all that hard work, all that like weird sort of like, how do I get there, and asking myself questions, and also the current state of the industry at that time is the reason why that success happened. It was a lot of planning. And then when I had that interview, I had one guy look at my book. He opened up to the first page. This is David James. And he goes, this is amazing work. And he just closed it. He didn't look at the rest of it. And he goes, when can you start?
That's awesome.
And I was like, holy crap. And I still remember the piece. And it was crazy. It was a painting that was an idea from a dream. And it was crazy. I went on this whitewater rafting trip with my family in up north in California. And we were on the bottom of the water, and there was these rocks on either side of me, and they're just around me, and there's like water splashing down. It was just like one of those beautiful scenes. And the producer from Kung Fu Panda said, this looks exactly like what we're trying to do for Kung Fu Panda. And I go, what the hell? And he's like, yeah, this looks like one of our backgrounds. Like, when can you start? And so there was actually a war between the two of them to get me on the show, and the Kung Fu Panda guy won because they were in more of a crisis. And so I jumped onto that and started painting backgrounds, and I haven't looked back since, man. It's been a lot of fun.
That's awesome, man. Was that always well, I guess that wasn't exactly the way, because you didn't think, oh, I want to be a production designer at the end, or sort of like further down the line. But was that always the plan?
I never wanted to be a PD, honestly. Like, I never thought about being a production designer. I actually found out about the job at DreamWorks because I got really lucky. My first day on the job, my art director took me to lunch, and I sat down with Ramon Zebach and Scott Wills, like the art director of Samurai Jack. And we all sat down and had lunch. And I was like, what do you guys do? I didn't know who they were. And I was like, what are you guys up to? And they were just like, this fucking kid, like, who is this guy? And it was so funny because I realized that I was such a small fish in like a huge pond. And I was like, just listening to these great artists speak about their craft and fucking around, like they're all just friends, and elbowing each other and talking shit. And, it was fun. It was a good place to be. And I found that I liked what they were doing. I liked like the way that they were thinking, and being around all that was a very privileged opportunity. And I felt honored to be in that environment. And by the end of it, I was like, I don't know if I want to art direct, but I would love to try it one day. And a friend called me when it was like the game studio because I got let go from DreamWorks. They had their first round of layoffs in 2014, and this is right before they shut down PDI. Mind you, I had trained so many artists there because I was a teacher and I was training other visual development artists in other countries that were coming to like the studio to visit. Yeah. And then they legit let me go and then kept all those artists that I trained. So it was a company basically upheaval at the time. And it was shocking. It was like, oh man, I thought they would be allies with me and loyal to me because of all the like devotion I gave the studio. But that's when I realized that this is just the company.
Yeah.
That's what the hardest part of learning these lessons are, you know, Jose, is like, don't ever think that they're loyal to you. It's the bottom line. Right, and we're seeing that more than ever right now in the current landscape that we're in, people getting laid off by the thousands.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you know, sorry, I'm going to finish my story. So Cornea Wan called me and he's like, hey, do you want to art direct on Smallfoot? And he was at Warner Brothers and he was hired on to be the production designer. So I left my games job to go work with him. Turns out the producer didn't think I was a good fit for art director, but I had already left my job. And so I stayed on as lead visual development artist, which was fine. And I feel like if I'm not ready for the seat, like I'm not deserving of it. That's totally fine. Whoever you feel is best fit, do it. And then I got a call from Rob Rupel, and he was working on this movie called Darkmouth at Alcon Entertainment. And he's like, how would you like to art direct on this project? And I was like, absolutely. I would love to work with you. Like, I'm so honored, man. And I actually owe a lot of my trajectory to him because he gave me the shot. And he ended up leaving the show. He went to go work on Tiger's Apprentice at Paramount. And then after that, Intergalactic. But I stayed and I took the role, his role as production designer. And I realized I knew what I was doing from the very beginning. Like, people were asking me questions. I knew the answers to them. I knew exactly how long things took to take to do things. I knew I had a big network at that point because I had worked at DreamWorks for so long and had taught. And honestly, teaching is where you build your network. Because I've been teaching for a long time and I meet a lot of amazing students. And I'm like, I'm going to give you a shot. I'm going to give you a shot. I'm going to give you a shot one day because you're a fucking awesome person.
Yeah.
You're not just an amazing artist, but you're an awesome person and you deserve it. Yeah. And I see this like, I have friends that I've hired. Like, I get emotional about this, man. Like, that they're struggling, dude. They have 2 jobs. They got kids at home. They're like, have nothing, man. And I'm like, I got your back. Like, when I get the chance to be the lead in leadership and hire you, I'm going to do it. And like, that's why I teach, man. That's why I give back every single day, is because I care about those people, you know?
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, you got to take care of the ones that really deserve it at the end of the day.
Yes, but especially if you're part of their progression and their growth, you know, like that's really like personal. And it's not like you're just hiring just a artist that just applies to the job. You're actually hiring almost somebody that, you know, you actually know personally, which I think is way
different. Yeah,
and I think the work is probably even better.
And because they're gonna have your back.
Yeah.
You know, and they're gonna fall on swords 100 times for you, and they're gonna trust you. And I'm gonna do the same for them. And I'm a firm believer that you lead by empathy. You lead by compassion and passion for your team too. And I always think of every single decision that I ever make is with my team in mind. It's never by myself. And it's just like a marriage, man. Like you ask your wife first before you make a big purchase.
Yeah.
You ask your team before you make a big commitment for them, because they're the ones who are going to be doing the majority of the work. And also, I'll be helping them. I'm in the trenches, man. That's one thing that I will always say to anybody that interviews me is like, I'm doing as much work or more work than my team, because I'm setting the example for them to follow.
Yeah. You gotta set that standard, because if not, they're not gonna follow you, or at least they won't follow you long if you don't set that standard.
You have to.
Yeah. Yep. You mentioned something about, you know, it's just a company, or you know, the bottom line and all that. And I was literally thinking about, you know, all the stuff that is happening right now in the past couple months.
Yeah, me too, man. Yeah.
And it's very unfortunate. But and I was having this conversation with another person that I was talking for the podcast. Like, a lot of the times, and what I've been seeing a lot, you know, it's a lot of people, which I understand, they're sort of putting them like putting the blame on AI, and like all the higher ups, they want to get more higher pay and all that stuff. And I'm like, I don't, that's not really the case. Like, this is just, business
We're in a
decisions.
recession.
Yeah.
We're in the middle of a recession right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just AI.
Yeah.
It's our economy is in a bad spot at the moment, where, this is like 2008 all over again, maybe at a bigger scale.
Right. Right. Yeah. And then, one of earlier this year, I turned 40 last December, and I did like a little post of, some of the stuff that I've learned. And one of the tips that I was sharing was learn, even if it's just a little bit, learn about just business, because you understand that, that whole, because, business is like it's like an organism. And you take decisions at one point, and you gotta pay the consequences, whether they're good or bad, later down the line. And a lot of these companies, because of COVID, they made decisions to, grow and all this stuff, and now they're seeing a recession, so they gotta cut back on expenses and doing all this stuff. So if and I try to share it just to kind of, if you understand that, you're not gonna have that mentality of putting the blame on things that are not really true. And you can
Right.
actually move with that, with that trajectory of what's happening now. It doesn't mean that it's not a bad thing that all these artists are getting laid off, but it's not personal, or it's not, there's no emotion behind it, I think. But I totally get that. But it's funny that you say that, because you're at a higher spot, and you can see it that way, which I think is super healthy, especially if you have a team underneath you.
I think you made a lot of really great points there, just about, in general, just where we are in our current state, and thinking about things in a way where I'm not emotional,
Right.
and just looking at things as a businessman. You have to be open to everything, and I think that's something that a lot of artists feel like, oh, I didn't make it as an artist because I didn't get the art job. But every single job that you take, whether it be working in retail or working in a management position for another type of, a platform, whether it be, in a hospital, or, even just a service person working in helping somebody out with like courier job, all these jobs are essential in where your ultimate goals are.
Right.
And I've had a lot of jobs, dude.
Yeah.
Like when I first graduated from college, I couldn't find a job. I was working at a loan consultant company as a senior loan consultant, and I was doing loans for homes and refinancing. And this was at the birth of the economic crash in 2008. That was like the hardest time. And I was cold calling people on the phone through Lending Tree and saying, hey, you made a request to have a refinance on your home. I'm a senior loan consultant from Best Rate Funding, and I'm just cold calling you right now to let you know that I got your application. I'm working right now with the brokerage, and I'm trying to put together craft a loan for you, very special, tailored to what you're looking for. And I have that script in my head because that was the job that I had. And it's the same exact thing that you do when you're pitching an idea to a studio executive, or talking to your friend about something that you're trying to do with them. And I think that, business is part of your daily life.
Yeah.
When you wake up in the morning and you start breathing, you're like, hey man, am I going to take care of myself today? I'm going to go for a walk. I got to keep this vessel in good shape. And I know you have a martial arts background. So do I. I actually train in Jeet Kune Do.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I'm obsessed with Bruce Lee. And I had a teacher when I was in art school that had a background in it as well. And we used to spar. Like we would do life drawing and then observational drawing. And he's like, hey, you want to hang out? And then we could spar after. And I was like, are you crazy? Let's go. So we would put on some music and just like close all the doors and lock them. And we just spar. And he was a big guy. He was like 6'6", and he was built like a skin and bones, like this skinny guy. And he was in his 70s.
Oh, wow.
And he could take me out. He could just like lift me off my feet and throw me to the ground. And I just remember this like great feeling of like my art and my passions like kind of coming together. And I'm also obsessed with cars and like building like old like vintage cars and stuff like that. Nice. So there's just little things that, you got to have outlets for. And all of that goes into your art. It all goes into your craft. And and the way that you think too as well. I know that you realize that too as well. It's that training, it's that discipline, it's the kind of, it's almost like a religion where you have to practice every single day and like have the mental fortitude and the perseverance in order for you to be a success.
Yeah.
And it's all that preparation and that opportunity, whether you get into a fight or, you know, you get into a situation where you're kind of battling for your life in like a physical or emotional sense. All those things are all paying a big cost from what you've learned from before. And it can all end in an instant. And you know that. And that's part of what makes us amazing as human beings, is that we're so resilient. We can get kicked down so many times and then get back up and rebuild ourselves. Just like Japan, man, they get like knocked out by tsunamis all the time and then they rebuild. Their culture is about rebuilding.
Yeah.
Great. It's amazing, you know?
Yeah.
So those are things I think about every day, even as a, you know, just not a lot of people think about that thing. They think about like, what's going on right now? Okay, let me just start my day.
Right.
But you gotta have like years of planning from, you know, months and hours and seconds before that have all come to that crescendo in that very specific moment to strike. And it's all that power and thinking needs to be in a pinpoint when you need it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I was actually talking, I had a pod last night with a guy from Australia, and he still practices MMA and all that. So we were talking a little bit about, you know, martial arts and stuff like that. And we're talking about how at least to me, when I'm either sparring or like rolling on doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or anything like that, at that moment, there's really not anything else in my mind except that, just because the stakes are higher. And you know, that could translate also into the work that we do as artists, but also develops, like, to me, when I'm in those situations, I'm the most creative Jose that you can see, because I gotta keep thinking and readapting with the moves, with whatever is
That's
happening, because
awesome.
you cannot really plan for it. Like, you cannot say, oh, I'm gonna throw this and this, because he could do something else, and then you have to adapt and move, and that sort of like translates into at least how I deal with my everyday in my work, which I love it.
I can see that. I can see that. I can see that in the way you speak and the way you carry yourself. It's very admirable, man.
Oh,
I love
thank you,
that.
man. I'm honored. But it's you have been almost like hopping around into so many projects and so many working with so many different people, and I learned this a little bit later, after I started in this industry, is that this industry, and it's like, I think that you can grow the fastest and the better way when you're hopping around almost into like different projects, and you know, working with different people. It has a higher risk, because you know, you don't know maybe what's the next project after you're done with what you're currently working on. But you know, in contrary to the regular getting to a studio full time and you just stay there for 5, 10, 15 years, whatever the case, which none of them are wrong, but I feel like in order to get that growth in 10 years or 12 years to get to that higher place, if you want to get there, like the way that you did it, of, you know, moving around stuff, is the way to go, right?
Well, not necessarily. If I could stay at a studio for the rest of my career, I would.
Yeah.
And yeah, oh yeah. I want to. And honestly, at the end of the day, I never wanted to leave any of my jobs. And I wanted to be there and have foundation and build that foundation and trust with those teams. I was forced in a way to leave studios. The first one was a layoff, you know. The second one was because of a circumstance that was out of my control, and I didn't have no options, you know. And we can get into an offline conversation about the real things that happened. And you know, there's certain things that you have to hold close to your vest in your life. And whether it's like how much money you make, or you know, what kind of financial goals you really have set up for yourself, and what are your tent poles, and what are your failures too, that make you grow. But to be honest with you, I never thought of it as a growing thing. I was like, let me just be consistent. Let me hold a job down and do great work. And at the end of the day, the money will come. And I never like was like, hey, I need to make $1 million. Like I'm not that kind of a person. I really don't care exactly about how much money I make until I got older and was like, oh, I got to buy a house, I guess, and I didn't start getting very serious about money until probably I was like 26. And right around 26, I was like, damn, dude, like this is hard. Like I got to be able to own a car. I got to be able to pay for all my insurances. You know the drill.
Yeah.
And I was like, maybe I want to have a family.
How old are you now, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm 43 years old, going to be 44.
Okay.
Yeah. So I worked my ass off to be a production designer. And it took 17 years to be really where I am now. And then before that, I had another whole life ahead of, that I was doing another career. And, that's something you don't realize is going to happen. And you look at this thing and it's like all of that was that crescendo to where I am now. And I may not be even close to where I'm going to end up being later.
Right.
And at the end of the day, I want to direct my own movies. I want to be a producer and work on my own stuff. And that's where I want to go ultimately. Production designer is just the beginning of that gateway into those roles.
Right.
And, I think that honestly, man, there's success for me as an artist is not evolved by over time. It's like staying in the moment, being focused on what you need to get done, and then just being cool to everybody around you because it's a very small industry. And, hopping around isn't a good look. For me, I don't want to hop around. I've been on Transformers for almost 3 years. And then when I was on Smallfoot, I was on that show for 3 years. And when I was at DreamWorks, I worked on a lot of different projects because I was brought on as a project on development slate artist. And if you don't know what that means is as they were in development, they bring somebody in to come up with a visual style for the show.
Right.
And I worked on 20 projects when I was at DreamWorks. And they brought me in and they say, hey, you got a month to do art for this. And we need a look and we go. And I just sit down with the director and I'd say, nothing's been done. Or do you have any ideas for this? No. Can you start bringing ideas to the table? I look at the written word. There's literally no visuals that I've done at all for it. Sometimes the director is an artist and they go, hey, here's some storyboards or here's some reference I was looking at that was inspiring me for when I was writing the story. And then you take those and you bring them all together under one just giant like microscope and you go, hey, what's the best part of this?
Right.
And then you extrapolate that and then you start creating visuals and you go, hey, this would work for this would work for this, and this works for it. Like, how do we make a baby out of that and remix it all together? And so much of it is all about your opinion. They're hiring you for your taste, your flavor. You have it's like a chef, right? They give you a few ingredients, they put them on a table, make something, right? And it's the same thing for what we do. It's like a doctor. When you go into an emergency room and you see someone bleeding out and you go, holy crap, you're bleeding out, dude. Like, where is that coming from? And so you start to diagnose. You're like, oh, that looks like it's coming from your liver, or that's coming from where you're losing air. So maybe it's your lung that's been punctured. And so when you come onto a show that's in production and it's falling apart, you're triaging the parts that are bleeding and fixing them so that thing can get back, the organism can get back on track again and breathe. And so it's the same thing for art where you're like diagnosing, adjusting, refocusing your energy. And that comes from my dad, and it comes from being in medicine and studying biology. All those tools that I learned in the back come to where I am as an artist, and I put those into effect, cause and effect.
Yeah. Man, that's good. I have 3 quick questions that I want to ask you before we end here, because I don't want to take too much of your time.
Oh no, you're fine.
Busy, but
no worries.
First question is, and we sort of touched a little bit about this. What is there anything outside of art that sort of like feeds your soul in sort of like the same manner?
I think nature, man.
Yeah.
I'm inspired by the man-made world.
Yeah.
And about the natural world. And I'm always trying to find a way to like create my own versions of that. And so when I go out for like a walk on like a trail, I'm looking at all my surroundings and everything around me, down to the smallest pebble to the ripple in the pond, and going like, what is a graphic representation of that? How do I make that into a shape?
Right.
How do I take this like light that I'm looking at right now at the sunrise and do it in a digital way? Or how do I do it in a way where it's reproducible for other people to understand too? And you're looking at your tools and you're going, hey, what are my limitations here?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, like in a video game, it's a very good example is levels of detail. So you can sort of like level of detail in and out. And so if the player is closer to an object, that's the highest level of detail. And if something's further off in the background, it could be a card. And it's the same way that I approach like a movie where it's like, we don't need to spend the money on like that thing way, way back there.
Right.
Let's put our money on what the hero is of the scene, where it's the character and the main prop and or the environment that they're interacting with. And so my passions for like nature, my passions for like the physical world and the man-made world come into what I do. And so they're always working in perfect harmony together. And I'm always like trying to create an ecosystem in my own mind of things that I can grab, like blueprints of things that I can start to create. And I think that's part about being a world builder, is knowing things that you can reverse engineer.
Right.
And having like those backgrounds that you have, you know, martial arts, it's very similar because you can go, hey, there's a certain sequence of moves that I can put together that would attack this situation, this problem. And they become virtually instinct. After a while, after you've practiced for so long, if someone comes at you with like a right hook or a left hook, or you need to freaking duck on somebody, or if you're someone that's a surfer and there's a big wave coming at you and you got to duck dive that thing and you got to pull all that pressure of your body out of the water again and get prepared for the next wave that's going to come. It's the same thing for how you're attacking a visual problem.
Right.
You're like, oh, this is a huge visual wave that I need to tackle. How do I, dive this thing? Or how do I jump over? How do I ride this thing? And so there's all of these little, nuances that you do in your daily life that are injected into who you are as a person. And I have this like really rich philosophy because I just like, I'm so in awe by everybody else before me. And I'm constantly learning about history and people that are successful. And I'm watching like, sometimes like when I'm on my downtime, I'll watch like the making of a movie. And like when those movies fail, I like when people fuck up.
Yeah, right. That's where you learn the most.
It's like, that's when you learn the most, man.
Yeah.
Like I have fucked up so many times in my life. And I think that's totally okay. Yeah. Like make as many mistakes as you possibly can, fail over and over again, because you're like, hey, next time I go do that, I'm not doing that again the same way. I'm going about it this way because the person that was successful at doing that did it this way.
Right.
And I'm going to try it. And when it's not a success, it's like, hey, that didn't work either for this specific, project that I'm on, or this specific obstacle that I'm facing. And adversity is where you really grow.
Yeah. It's funny that you said that because I had recently this week, I had my quarterly review at work, and I do review every quarter, and I always talk to my manager. Me and her are pretty close, so I'm like, I'm not really super interested in all the good stuff that I did. Like, yeah, that's fine, great. Tell me the bad stuff, because that's what I need to fix. I don't need an ego boost or anything like that. I just need to know how can I get it better.
That's awesome.
But
yeah.
The second question, this is a quick one. If I give you $1,000 right now, what do you do with it?
I save it, man.
Yeah.
I put it away in my cash account where it has a reward to it.
Yeah.
It's funny. I didn't do that before. I was like, oh, I'm going to go, buy myself something really nice that I need right now, or I want. Right. And I'm not that way anymore. I used to be like, oh, I'm going to buy a car part. It's going to be some shiny like piece of metal that I can stick on a car that looks amazing.
Yeah.
But you don't get those are returns that you don't get, and it's this temporary like excitement, like a burst of impulse, and I find that it's like so long forgotten before you even get a chance to enjoy it. And so for the future, this is my goal this year specifically, is I'm in savings mode.
Yeah.
And I'm in this mode where it's like, I'm not going to like output all my money. I'm going to think about retirement a little bit more. I'm going to put away every single check that I get. I always put away like $1,000. And I'm like, I'm not touching that.
Right.
That $1,000 is for the future. And I know I'm going to need it. If I don't survive, it's going to my wife. It's going to my family, because they're going to need it.
Yeah.
And, and value is a crazy thing. You place a lot of weight on value, whether it's the value that you have for yourself or the value that you have for others. I value all things. I value the world that I live in. I respect the world that I live in. I try not to create a lot of trash. I recycle. I pay my taxes. I contribute to society. I teach. I'm doing this for free. I'm talking to you because you're an awesome person and you're helping the community, and I want to help the community too. That's what I'm going to do with my $1,000, man.
Thank you. Thank you. Cool, man. Um, Last question, and this is something I ask everybody. You've been in the industry for quite a long time, and I've been only probably 10, 12 years, and I know every artist that has been long enough has had to have some sort of sacrifices throughout the way, and sometimes sacrifices that maybe not nobody knows, or that maybe just one person, or the person close to you knows about it. Could you share like what would be that sacrifice for you, that one sacrifice that you think like, man, this was a really hard one, or something like that?
Wow. That's an extremely difficult question to answer. Um, Sacrifice is very personal.
Yeah.
And I think that, like one thing that not a lot of people know about me is that, because my family, they're pretty far away. They're in Orange County. It's like an hour drive. It's not a big deal. It's not like I have to get on a plane or anything.
Right.
But in order for me to be successful in my job, I had to move away from them.
Yeah.
And it breaks my heart because my parents are getting very old now. A lot of them are in perfect health. My dad's a diabetic. My mom, she's still working. She's in her 70s and she's still working every single day, and she works 12-hour shifts, and she's a nurse. And my stepdad's health is fading. He just had like a massive hip surgery. He has cancer. My dad almost died during the pandemic from his diabetes because he had renal failure. But I couldn't be there with him because I was so focused on my job and about getting things done in my daily life that was the biggest sacrifice, was to say, hey, I'm so sorry I can't be there right now at this very moment, but I will be there later. And I think that's the hardest thing for me, to like turn my cheek to my blood and my flesh and bone, and like people who have raised me, and say, can I come back to you a little bit later once I've reached my objective? And I'm always there for them. I go see them on the weekends. I still call them every single day, but it's a big sacrifice, man, to to do what we do and to do it at such a high level. It's like the 1% of the 1% of the 1%. It's like you have to make sure that your people are taken care of, because you can't be good unless your people are good.
Right.
And that's my sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very similar to mine as well. And the person, I was talking to an artist called Damien last night, and he had a very similar sacrifice with me, where the greatest sacrifice wasn't ours specifically, it was our spouse's sacrifice, because in both of our cases, we had to move from where we were from into this new country, and they had to leave everything that they had behind. And in my case, my wife had a mom with Alzheimer's on a home, and my family was still back home and all that. So like in his case, in my case, it was very similar, where they had to, it was the spouse's sacrifice bigger than what we had to do. But I was telling him that in my case, at least the way I see it is like, yeah, we had to do that in a way, but in a way that also like fuels me to make the best out of the situation, and like make this the best thing that I can make it, so we can look back and say, it was in a way sort of worth it. And we still, took care of the family.
I love that so much. And I feel like that's how I feel too. I think we share a lot of that same value, because it's like you're giving away critical time. And these moments that you're never going to get back, time is only borrowed.
Right.
And it's so important to make good decisions, to do the right thing for yourself and for the people around you. And my mom, my spouse, my family, everybody are so important to me, man. It's sort of like irks me sometimes of how much I've like given away for what I do. And I'm so grateful for them. I mean, there's a reason why I'm so successful as well, is because my wife has been there to support me through thick and thin. And she suffers when I go through a really rough time on a project. She hears all about it. She's suffering with me. And in a way, she's more devastated than I am, because I'm the person that she loves with all of her heart. And she's watching me go through turmoil. And, and that's why I try to grin and bear a lot of the issues myself. And then when it's really bad, where I can't handle it anymore, where I'm getting anxiety because of it, it's keeping me up at night, it's making me wake up early, then they have to deal with it too, because it's also part of their lives as well. And I do the same for her. And I do the same thing for my family, where I take their overflow. It's like, I'll eat a little bit of your pain for you so you can be more comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's a big sacrifice, and that's a perseverance thing too. It's like persevering through those pains and those struggles. And I highly recommend and respect you for what you have done for your wife too as
Oh,
well,
thank you,
because I'm
man.
sure that she's struggled as well, and you've been there for her.
Yeah, for sure. And also, like if you think about your parents, like I mean, I'm not a parent yet, but if I had a kid, like even
Yeah.
if we were away, like I would be sort of proud that that kid is thriving, even though it's not maybe so close to me, but that person is right, because that's sort of like, I guess, and again, I'm not a parent in no way, so I have no idea what that feels like, but I'm pretty sure it's like a bird leaving the nest type thing and doing their thing and thriving and stuff, as long as they're doing good. So hopefully hopefully that works.
And there's these like little jewels and pearls that your family leaves for you, these tokens of wisdom that make you who you are.
Yeah.
And like my dad, my stepdad, my mom, my stepmom, my brother, all of them have these like amazing pieces of wisdom, and friends too, where they're just like dropping these jewels on me, and I'm like, damn, I need to take that with me, and I got to keep that in my treasure trove.
Yeah.
And when I need to use that, I'm going to use it. And that's the bread and butter, man. That's what makes life so special.
Yeah.
And to make sure you hold on to those jewels and those pieces of knowledge, because it's gonna bless you when you least expect it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. But man, great. Thank you so much again for joining me. It's
Let's
been
stay
quite
in
a
touch,
pleasure.
man. I love
Yeah.
talking to you.
Yeah.
You're a
Yeah.
great guy. I love what you're doing with your channel. I like that you're doing this. If you want to have me back in the future, let me
Yeah,
know.
for sure. For
I'm
sure.
happy to contribute, and I'm looking forward to seeing your successes and for you to build in your future. If you ever need any career advice or just want to chat, and also to the community that's listening, like reach out if you have a
Yeah.
question. Reach out to me. Watch Transformers; it comes out this
Oh,
year,
heck
so
yeah.
be cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Blue Eye Samurai too. It was really good. It was really good too. But
yes,
yeah,
it was.
congratulations
It's
on
an
what you
amazing
have
show.
accomplished. It's been quite a ride, and really looking forward to talk to you again, man.
Thank you. Take care. Have a great day.
All right, my man.